As we consider making amends for personal harm done to others during the high holy days, the mind can easily dwell on the tremendous ongoing systemic harm being done in Gaza. I thought this might be a good moment to wrestle with this conflict that seems impossible to resolve, yet also impossible to ignore. The worst day in the modern history of Israel began in the early morning hours of October 7th, 2023, by motorized paragliders, boats, trucks, on foot. The Hamas attack crossed what should have been a well-defended border. The attackers engaged in torture, sexual violence, and the execution of men, women, and children. Some communities lost 10% of its residents who were killed, dozens abducted, and homes were destroyed. People were murdered in public places, at a festival site, and in private homes, even supposedly safe rooms. By the end of the day, about 1,200 people were killed and over 240 hostages were taken to Gaza. There remain about 48, of which it's hoped there are maybe 20 still alive. Tens of thousands of Israelis were displaced from their homes, and many remain in temporary housing. Though this was the most devastating attack by Hamas, it has been the source of harm against Israel for many years. Founded as a Palestinian-focused offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, its prime directive is the Islamization of society and governance. It completely rejects the state of Israel and explicitly calls for its destruction through violent means, emphasizing martyrdom and the obligation of all Muslims to participate in the struggle. It does not recognize any other form of Palestinian secular nationalism. Hamas has been behind much of the escalation of violent resistance that has hardened Israeli attitudes that peace cannot be attained with Palestinians. During the 1990s, Hamas organized a series of suicide bombings on buses, public markets, security checkpoints, and restaurants in major Israeli cities that killed hundreds and wounded thousands. Starting in the 2000s, Hamas began rocket attacks into Israel from Gaza that escalated from hundreds to thousands. These rocket barrages killed people, destroyed homes, schools, roads, energy infrastructure, and workplaces were affected too, with repeated cycles of reconstruction and recovery. The smaller incursions across the Gaza border led to earlier kidnappings of Israelis. Given this terrible history of conflict with Hamas, the security failure of October 7th was egregious. Israeli intelligence knew of attack plans, but dismissed them, believing Hamas was satisfied with the status quo and didn't have the ability to pull off such an attack. Israeli leadership consistently prioritized conflict management rather than seeking long-term solutions. Hamas was treated as a manageable adversary. Build a wall of containment and move on to other threats. Managing rather than working to resolve conflict has been a pattern with Israel since its inception. This may not be the first time that approach has failed catastrophically. The motives for Hamas's escalation were partly the negotiation of normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, along with agreements with other Arab states that were being made. It felt to them like their Islamization cause had been marginalized in the process of giving Israel legitimacy in the region. Given this existential threat, Hamas sought to disrupt the normalization train. Hamas hoped for a permanent state of war with Israel after the October 7th attack. That war would revive Palestinian nationalism and re-energize the whole reason that they exist, the destruction of the state of Israel. The plight of the Palestinians who occupied the land that became Israel has been a source of conflict from the first days of Israel's statehood. On May 14th, 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel in Tel Aviv just as the British Mandate period was ending. This was preceded by a United Nations plan in 1947 to partition Palestine into separate Jewish and Palestinian and Arab states with Judaism under international control. Jewish leadership accepted that partition, but Arab leaders and most of the local Arab population rejected it. They argued it violated their rights and that all Palestine should remain Arab. The Arab-Israeli war ensued. 750,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled, and 500 Palestinian towns were destroyed. After the war ended, the Palestinians deprived of citizenship who had left were not allowed to come home, with many stuck in refugee camps that continue to exist today. The 1967 war further extended the displacement through the occupation of the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and other territories, forcing another 250,000 Palestinians to flee or be killed. From the beginning of what is called the Nikba, or catastrophe, in 1947 by Palestinians, those that managed to remain have been marginalized through house demolitions, expulsions, and restrictions, such as closures and blockades, creating conditions that force Palestinians to leave their homes over decades. Israel has systematically sustained a multi-pronged strategy of displacement through war, legal measures, urban planning, military occupation, and socioeconomic pressure to establish and maintain a Jewish majority and territorial dominance over historic Palestine. That continuing marginalization has fueled armed resistance by organizations like Fatah and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. This doesn't mean that there haven't been efforts at resolution of the Palestinian problem too. The Oslo Accords of the 1990s was a step forward with the establishment of a Palestinian Authority for Israel to negotiate with for self-rule. The work that began with those accords, unfortunately, was never finished, partly due by opposition by Netanyahu's coalition. The 2000 Camp David summit came close, but failed, along with the Omar Abbas negotiations of 2007 and 2008. And U.S.-led talks with John Kerry collapsed. No talks since then have made significant progress. Continued Hamas and Hezbollah violence with Iranian support, West Bank settlement expansion, refugee right of return or resettlement, borders, and the status of Jerusalem have all been issues that have blocked progress. But more important than any other barrier to progress has been Netanyahu. Over the last 15 years, under Netanyahu's leadership, Israel has sharply retreated from the peace process through policies and actions. Those policies and actions have systematically undercut the possibility of a two-state solution and a negotiated end to the conflict with Palestinians. Netanyahu's governments have overseen unprecedented expansion of Israel settlements in the West Bank. Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected ceasefire proposals and long-term truces from Palestinian factions, even when these included terms for prisoner exchanges and hostilities cessation, arguing that such offers were tactical and not genuine steps toward peace. I doubt I need to say more about why and how Netanyahu's leadership and extremist position have been bad for Palestinians. Listening to his rhetoric last week at the UN, it is very clear Netanyahu has little interest in the end of his war to eliminate Hamas. The exile, suffering, and death of tens and thousands of Palestinians in Gaza doesn't seem to affect him. He anticipates atrocities committed by Hamas will mobilize his base and undermine any support for Israel to make peace with Palestinians. He also expects this will create tolerance for more settlements in the West Bank, which will eventually eliminate the possibility of a two-state solution. Hamas has no interest in the end of the war either. The suffering of Palestinians feeds their PR machine, framing Israel as colonial genocidal maniacs that hope to undermine international support for Israel. Their method of fighting, using Palestinians as human shields over their tunnels and around their tunnel openings, also generates PR for them when Israel attacks and Palestinians are killed or injured. Every Palestinian death is a victory for them if it weakens international support. And who are always the losers in this conflict? The Palestinians, the Palestinian people. It is abundantly clear that Hamas cannot be a partner for making peace with Israel and finally bringing resolution for the Palestinians. It is also clear that Netanyahu's government will never be a partner for peace, either given the radicals of his coalition that he needs to hold power. The only path that I see to peace is through and with the Israeli people themselves and the Palestinians themselves joining together to demand a resolution. The path to a solution must come from the bottom up. Many Israelis are tired of fighting forever wars. They are heartbroken, losing their spouses, siblings, and children, their friends, their neighbors, through war and violence. They are suffering from being called up repeatedly for military service. Palestinians are done with being human shields for Hamas's tunnels and military maneuvers that put their lives constantly at risk. Both want to stop living in fear of being bombed and gain real security. Both want a resolution that can bring lasting peace. But how can that happen? How can Palestinians and Israelis work together to end the madness? What we in the United States may not realize is how many non-violent Israeli and Palestinian peace groups are there. They are demonstrating every day, and we never read about them. Here are just a few. On the Palestinian side are groups like Berlin Popular Committee Against the Wall, a Palestinian Village Committee leading weekly nonviolent protests since 2005 against the Israeli West Bank barriers, construction, and settlement expansion. Youth Against Settlements in Hebron, a Palestinian activist group that organizes civil disobedience actions and popular nonviolent resistance against Israel occupation, focusing on rights and opposing settlement expansion. Tent of Nations near Bethlehem, a Palestinian community resisting in land confiscation through decades of legal and political struggle and practicing principles of nonviolence, refusing victimhood or hatred while advocating justice. And the Palestinian youth movement, probably the most controversial on this list, they are a transnational network that has organized demonstrations in Western nations, advocating for justice and liberation with a strong anti-Zionist stance allied with indigenous causes. Most important to consider, however, about this group is their nonviolent, non-religious, decentralized orientation and their strong base of support. On the Israeli side, Peace Now, the largest and longest standing Israeli peace movement founded in 1978. Peace Now advocates for a two-state solution through public pressure, education, and activism. It emphasizes ending occupation, halting settlement expansion, and promoting negotiations based on the 1967 borders. Peace Now also runs Settlement Watch, monitoring settlement activity to prevent illegal construction. Standing Together, a grassroots movement uniting Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel to pursue peace, equality, and social justice. It organizes community support for victims of violence and promotes dialogue and cooperation. Combatants for Peace, founded by former Israeli and Palestinian combatants who renounce violence. This joint nonprofit promotes nonviolence, dialogue, and reconciliation through joint actions and education. The Parents Circle Family Forum, a grassroots organization of Israeli and Palestinian families who have lost loved ones in the conflict. It promotes reconciliation and coexistence through dialogue, education, and public meetings. An Alliance for Middle East Peace, a coalition of 170 organizations fostering cooperation, justice, equality, and peace among Israelis and Palestinians through grassroots peace building and advocacy. And finally, Women Wage Peace, Women of the Sun, Israeli and Palestinian sister movements, empowering women to support peace building and build cross-community trust. These are the power centers that can persuade their neighbors to support peace, organize resistance to government oppression, cooperate and lead, and build alliances and trust. This bottom-up approach to peace is already happening and needs our support. I was part of bringing one such group called Roots to Albany a few years ago. We heard two leaders, one who was a Jewish settler and the other the son of a Palestinian leader, about the challenges and the rewards of building peace together across huge differences. Is this easy? No. Will this be quick? No. Will people continue to die? Sadly, yes. But I believe the only peaceful solution that can last must have the support of the people on both sides. May we not demonize Israelis or Palestinians and support grassroots solutions the people there come up with and that they can live with. So be it.